When I first got into broadcasting, someone gave me advice to never enter the realm of predictions. Why? This person said, because if you're wrong, you look like an idiot. That is certainly true. But what this person didn't consider is that if you're right, you look like a genius. So today I'm going to break that rule and tell you my top 5 predictions for 2024. And I would advise you to brace yourself because they are not the most optimistic, but I think they're going to be prescient. I'm Julie Hartman, and this is Timeless. Hey everyone, and welcome to Timeless, the second show of 2024. Thank you all so much for being here. It is great, as always, to be with you. In addition to Timeless, check out Dennis and Julie, my show with Dennis Prager, who may or may not have been the person who gave me the prediction advice that I'm breaking today. You can catch that every Monday on this channel at 1 o'clock Pacific and 4 o'clock Eastern. You can also follow me on Instagram and Twitter at Julie R. Hartman. And as if that's not enough, you can also email me at julie@julie-hartman.com. So yes, today we are getting into the realm of predictions. Please grab a glass of wine because at least 4 out of the 5 are not the most comforting, shall we say. I would say that I'm a pretty optimistic person most of the time, and I think there is some reason for optimism. Living in the United States of America, there's always reason for optimism. But frankly, as we barrel into 2024, there are a lot of forces, certainly internationally, which are building in power. And I think that we are going to see a lot of more international conflict and chaos entering into this year. You know what I'm thinking about doing? 365 days from now, maybe I'll do a follow-up episode where I look back on these 5 predictions and assess whether or not I was right and whether I should have followed Dennis's advice to not get into the realm of predictions. But hey, we're already in the episode. We might as well continue. Already, it's been so interesting to see. We're, 4 days into 2024? Already, it has been an eventful and, in many cases, tragic year. Whenever it's a new year, I don't know about you, but I love kind of taking some time to look at the news, and I want to figure out, like, okay, when is the first story of this year that all of us are really going to go wow at? Like, how many hours or how many days into the new year will be peaceful until all of us go, oh, it's like every other year and there are all these bad things happening? Well, this one happened pretty quickly. I don't know if you all saw this, but there was a big plane crash in Japan. Japan Airlines jet collided with a Japanese Coast Guard plane. And that was just like a huge, crazy scene of that plane being engulfed. That was literally within hours of the new year. Also, just to make matters worse, or excuse me, this actually happened before the plane crash. There was a 7.6 magnitude earthquake in Japan. So over in that part of the world, they're not having the best start to 2024. Also, we saw on the first day of the year that a South Korean opposition leader had his throat slit as he was giving a speech. There was some guy who emerged from a crowd in a Shinzo Abe-like fashion and went up and stabbed this opposition leader. We don't know yet if he's going to survive this. I think right now he is in pretty bad condition, although he is still alive. But my gosh, as I said, didn't take long for all hell to break loose. We got news recently that the United States debt reached $34 trillion. The president of Harvard, or shall I say the former president of Harvard, Claudine Gay, resigned. Also on Wednesday, January 3rd, there were various state capitals around the country, Georgia, Hawaii, Kentucky, Maine, Mississippi, Michigan, Minnesota, which had to temporarily evacuate because there were several bomb threats to those buildings. And we also learned, I guess this is the one good piece of news that we've heard so far in 2024, in addition to the Claudine Gay resignation, that Israel carried out a successful assassination, I would say attempt, but it was successful. So a successful assassination against a Hamas leader in Beirut, Lebanon. So boy, if 2024 continues like anything it's been over the past few days, we are in for a wild ride. So now you can understand why I would advise you to grab a glass of wine for this episode because the predictions here are a little bit dark, but we have to prepare for them. So let's go in to prediction number 1. I would venture to say that sometime this year, and if not this year, within the next 2 to 3 years, it is more likely than not that China will invade Taiwan. I don't know if I would put those odds at, like 90-10, but I would definitely put it over 50%. I think that there's probably going to be one of two scenarios that happen here with China's invasion. The first one is that they could just launch a typical ground and air and sea invasion and capture Taiwan by brute force. Another option that they could pursue is a naval blockade or establishing a no-fly zone over the country of Taiwan. So essentially what that would do is it would starve the country because they wouldn't be able to get any products in or out. And essentially China would use that as an opportunity to say, okay, well, if you don't capitulate to us, we're going to continue this blockade. And so in effect, it is similar to an invasion. Why do I think this is going to happen imminently? There are a lot of people who say, I think that it's more likely than not that China is going to invade Taiwan sometime in the future. Xi Jinping at the 20th century, 20th, not 20th century, the 20th CCP Congress meeting in October of 2022 affirmed this. He gave a very impassioned speech where he said, the reunification of the motherland must be achieved. It must be achieved. And then there was all this thunderous applause. So they've been pretty open about the fact that they intend to do this. But why do I think it's going to happen sooner rather than later? Well, the short answer is that I think China knows that their moment to do this is not going to last very long. They have a window of opportunity that they need to take advantage of. And this is for a few reasons that have to do with things going on in China, in Taiwan, and in the United States. With China, they right now are facing a two-pronged issue, a demographic issue and an economic issue. China was once the most populous country in the world with 1.412 billion people in its population. But then last year, India surpassed China as the most populous country with 1.413 billion people, and it's ticked even upward since then. From the perspective of the Chinese, that was a big source of humiliation for them. China loved to tout the fact that they had the most populous country, which is really amazing, by the way, considering that from 1979 to 2015, they had the one-child policy where they literally forced families to only have one child because their population was so huge. But now they see that India is surpassing them, and soon a lot more countries than just India are likely to surpass them. According to the Wall Street Journal, this was an article published yesterday, fewer than 10 million babies were born in China in 2022. That is way down from 16 million, which were born in 2012. So it was almost cut in half, the birth rate over 10 years. Also, the population in China is projected to drop to 500 million by the year 2100. So that's pretty rapid that their population would be shrunk by a third in just about 80 years, less than 80 years, in fact. So they have this demographic problem. And they also have an economic problem. China experienced amazing economic growth over the past 2 to 3 centuries. They became a powerhouse specifically with making iPhones. One factory in China produced 85% of the world's iPhones in 2022. But interestingly, they have seen a some challenges posed to this economic success, mainly because a lot of companies, including Apple, want to get the heck out of China and kind of diversify where they have their factories, because they know that it's probably not the best idea to be beholden to a dictatorial superpower like China. And so there was a New York Times article that profiled this recently, and it was staggering. They said that 21% of Chinese citizens aged 16 to 24. So that is the, workforce demographic. 21% of those citizens aged 16 to 24 in Chinese cities were unemployed. Wow. That's not good. And also to compare it to India, their neighbor, and some would say their adversary, India at the same time as China is experiencing some economic problems, they're having some great economic success, where a lot of those factories, specifically Apple factories that were in China, are now being moved to India. And a lot of people, not just the United States, a lot of countries are viewing India as a more reliable economic partner. So China knows that their window is narrow, and they saw what happened to Japan. Japan in the 70s and 80s was seen as a country that was going to be an economic powerhouse. A lot of Americans were actually as fearful of Japan economically as we 5 years ago or 2 years ago were of China. But then what happened is that in the 1990s, Japan went into recession, and the Japanese population experienced a big demographic challenge. They have a very old population, and their population has been dwindling. So I think China is smart enough to see what happened to Japan and know that their window is small. In addition to those internal things, I think China will also look outward and go, it's probably a good idea to invade or have a military blockade of Taiwan while Joe Biden is president. They see his weakness. They see the botched Afghanistan withdrawal. They see how the United States is kind of shrugging its shoulders on its commitment to Ukraine. They see that although the United States is supporting Israel in its war in Gaza, we've also given billions and billions of dollars to Iran, the primary adversary of Israel. So I think China sees it's kind of incredible that we're both supporting Israel and supporting its adversary. And I think China knows that this is kind of their window, because although we, the United States, have pledged our commitment to support Taiwan should China invade. We've had that commitment to Taiwan since 1949, when Chiang Kai-shek and the Nationalist Party took over Taiwan. Even despite that commitment, I think China knows that we will be likely to renege on that obligation, because we haven't exactly proven that we are a power anymore, which will stand by the people who we pledge to stand by. Also, just to add a few more examples to further perhaps convince you of my prediction, Taiwan is a really formidable economic partner, although wouldn't be a partner if China invaded, because they have the Taiwan Semiconductor Manufacturing Company, which produces 92% of the world's advanced microchips. Microchips are that key ingredient, that key component that are used in literally almost all of the technologies that we use: cars, computers, TVs. And so China has been importing those microchips from Taiwan, and they would want to invade to get control of those microchips so that they no longer have to be relying on Taiwan, and so that they have big leverage over places like the United States, which also heavily rely on importing those microchips from the TSMC company. And of course, in addition to all those things, it would be a huge shot in the arm for China to successfully invade Taiwan. They've been talking about it for decades, and they view it as a huge source of embarrassment that Chiang Kai-shek and the Nationalist Party successfully moved away. So I think it would be a big shot in the arm for them nationally, and they know that given the economic and demographic problems, it's probably a good time to have that sense of national pride. So that's prediction number one. China may invade Taiwan this year. If not this year, then I think in the next 2 to 3 years. Prediction number 2, continuing with the great optimism, is that I think there's going to be another major war somewhere on the planet. If not China invading Taiwan, I think it will be Israel going to war with Hezbollah, or the United States / Israel going to war with Iran. Cheerful, right? But, you know, this is not unfounded, and we better kind of get ready for it. Let's start with Israel and Hezbollah. Hezbollah, for those who don't know, quick primer, is a terrorist organization which operates out of Lebanon, which is on the northern border of Israel, and it is funded by Iran, as is Hamas, as are individual, West Bank Palestinian freedom fighters. Iran funds any group which will commit atrocities in Israel. And Hezbollah has been shooting rockets into Israel, sending in suicide bombers, for decades. But now that this war in Israel is happening, Hezbollah has been considering opening a northern front to help their allies, Hamas, in their campaign to eradicate the Jews. So we've seen so far in this war, Hezbollah's held off a little bit because Israel has vowed to brutally retaliate. But we've even seen that Hezbollah so far has carried out 200 attacks, which have killed 6 Israeli soldiers and 4 civilians. That's according to the Wall Street Journal. I also mentioned to you a few minutes ago in my start of the episode with, oh my gosh, all these crazy things have already happened in 2024 and we're 4 days into it. I mentioned that Israel carried out that assassination against the Hamas leader in Beirut, Lebanon. The leader of Hezbollah, Hassan Nasrallah, I was going to call him Nasrallah Hassan, thank God I have my notes. The Hezbollah leader, Hassan Nasrallah, has made himself very clear that should Israel carry out any assassinations or attacks in Lebanon's territory against Hamas, against Hezbollah, against Iranian generals, that they will retaliate. So this assassination of this Hamas leader, and this was a big get for Israel because this Hamas leader was a military mastermind, and he was one of the primary kind of visionaries of the October 7th massacre. That could be kind of a kickoff, perhaps, of Hezbollah severely retaliating against Israel, and then perhaps that northern front, that war between Israel and Hezbollah, becoming more likely. Even if the war with Israel and Hezbollah doesn't happen, I predict that things are going to get significantly worse for Israel in their campaign in Gaza. Yes, in many ways, they have been successful at, getting to the tunnels, pumping seawater into the tunnels. As I said, getting rid of, executing some of the Hamas leaders. Yes, that is true. But if we're thinking long term here, it is going to be very difficult once Israel gets control of Gaza to keep control of Gaza. Because I don't know if you know this, in case you haven't been paying attention, so many people, especially the surrounding neighbors, despise Israel. And they are going to be unbelievably upset if Israel has a military occupation of Gaza. So this year and continuing in the future, I don't think that is going to pan out very well for Israel. And it's really unfortunate, to put it lightly, because Israel's kind of in an impossible situation where they have to, do something. They have to try to eliminate Hamas and perhaps take control of Gaza. But boy, there are going to be so many roadblocks. We forget that the British Army occupied Northern Ireland for 30 years in the latter half of the 20th century. And they even had 2/3 of the population, the Protestant population of Northern Ireland, on their side. They only had 1/3 of the population, the Catholics, opposing them. And still, they couldn't even remain because that 1/3 was so hostile to them. Can you imagine? Israel has 100% of the population against them, of Gaza, plus Hezbollah, Iran, Syria, Yemen, all of these surrounding nations against them. So that is certainly going to get worse. And, people are also saying, oh, well, Israel and Gaza can try to de-radicalize the Palestinian society so that they are not as they do not have as big of a hatred against Jews. In fact, Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, in the last few days of 2023, wrote an op-ed in the Wall Street Journal in which he argued that one of the 3 prerequisites for peace between Israel and the Palestinians was that Palestinian society had to be de-radicalized. And he referenced the way that German society was de-radicalized after World War II. But honestly, that seems like a pretty bad comparison to me because, and I actually have the quote here, he said, quote, "Successful de-radicalization took place in Germany and Japan after the Allied victory in World War II," end quote. So he's essentially saying the same thing can happen. I don't think that's a good comparison because when the de-radicalization took place in Germany, what happened was they had a staggering, unequivocal defeat in World War II. Both Germany and Japan, and certainly with Japan with the dropping of the atomic bombs. Also, all of Germany and Japan's allies had turned against them at that point. The war was over, and a lot of their former allies just so badly wanted it to end. And so, in other words, international and even domestic opinion after the war turned away from the intense radicalization which infected those countries, which facilitated the de-radicalization process. Israel is in a totally different situation. They do not have the same kind of international turning away from Hamas and this radical hatred of Jews as the aforementioned powers did in World War II. In fact, it's the opposite. I just mentioned that all of these people, Hamas, Hezbollah, Syria, Yemen, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan, Turkey, all of these countries are vigorous in their amount of hatred against Israel. And on top of that, we have people in the West, all over the West here in America, all over our college campuses, which are supporting the aforementioned powers and their hatred of Israel. So I just think it's kind of a pie in the sky dream to think that the Israelis are going to successfully de-radicalize Palestinian society. That is an uphill climb. I wish them the best in it, but I don't think it's going to happen, and we're going to see that this year. And then I mentioned the possibility of the United States and Israel going to war with Iran. We're already seeing some of the seeds being laid for this. We had the Houthis, that militant rebel group in Yemen, launch missile and drone strikes on commercial, including American ships in the Red Sea. The Houthis are backed by, guess who? Iran. Iran obviously hugely supports Hamas and Hezbollah. And so it wouldn't be surprising if we see Iran really step up its game in 2024, perhaps even leading to a United States/Israeli war. And again, to add some icing on the cake, maybe if that happens, it will give China another reason, another opportunity to go, okay, the West is distracted here. Maybe this is our time to move in on Taiwan. My gosh, I hate being the bearer of potentially bad news, but lucky for all of us, this next one, number 3, is, I would say, the most optimistic of all of my predictions. But before we get to that, I want to quickly tell you about MyPillow. I use a lot of MyPillow products. I walk into work every day wearing my slippers. I also sleep on my pillows, in fact, and I use my towels, which are fantastic. And you can get a lot of these products and at a discount if you use the promo code Hartman, which is my last name, spelled Hartman. And right now, MyPillow has their biggest bedding sale ever. You can get the Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $29.98, a set of pillowcases for only $9.98, and a MyPillow mattress topper for as low as $99.99. They also have blankets in a variety of sizes, colors, and styles. They even have blankets for your pets. Get duvets, quilts, down comforters, body pillows, bolster pillows, and so much more, all with the biggest discounts ever. They're also extending their money-back guarantee until March 1st, 2024. So go to mypillow.com and use the promo code Hartman or call 1-800-566-6745 and you'll get big discounts on all MyPillow bedding products, including, as I said, the Giza Dream bed sheets for as low as $29.98, and get all your shopping done now while quantities last. We need some optimism here, so let's go to prediction number 3, which is, I think that we are going to see a lot more Claudine Gay-like scandals or mea culpas at various institutions across the country. In other words, I think we're going to see more of a reckoning with the rancid nature of DEI. Now, and when I refer to institutions, I don't just mean institutions of higher education, though certainly those are, front and center. I also mean corporations, nonprofits, big kind of entities, even churches, just these big institutions which have unfortunately been racked with diversity, equity, inclusion, and woke diktats for some time now. So why do I think this is going to happen? Well, I think that October 7th changed everything. It changed everything in the sense of what I was just talking about, in that it really kind of altered the international sphere and perhaps made us more likely and vulnerable to further international conflict. But I think it also really exposed and kind of took the mask off of the DEI edifice here in the United States of America. Because even look at this Harvard scandal. It started after October 7th with those 33 student organizations signing that despicable letter saying that Israel is, quote, entirely responsible for the terrorist attack against them. Then we saw that these students are, blocking Jewish students from going to class. We saw that they are waving Hamas flags on these campuses. So that exposed one side of DEI, that this oppressor versus oppressed groupings are a terrible way to look at things, and also they're subjective because Jews stopped counting as people in the oppressed category once Hamas executed that terrorist attack. So that was one facet of the DEI complex that was demasked. Another one was, for all that these woke individuals and institutions claim to care about women and specifically about sexual assault, we saw in the aftermath of October 7th that they didn't give a damn about the sexual atrocities that Hamas committed and continues, by the way, to commit on a daily basis against Israeli women. That laid bare another severe internal contradiction and issue within DEI. Care about women until they're women who you don't like, and then don't care about them. We also saw the free speech issue come front and center as a result of the October 7th attacks and these university presidents having to go before Congress and give these, statements about certain calls for genocide, depending on the context. It raised these questions, are you universities of free speech, or do you punish things selectively? So again, October 7th changed the game in that it brought out all of these issues that some of us knew existed for quite some time, but really woke things up for other people. And so we saw this resignation of Claudine Gay, which was huge. The fact that a Black female president of Harvard, who served for 95 days, resigned, it's a big deal. We also saw that there were things that were brought against Ibram X. Kendi, who is the How to Be an Anti-Racist professor who headed the Anti-Racism Institute at BU, and he was found to have mishandled, it's one way of putting it, some financial records. And so I think we're going to see this continue as the year goes on, because here's the thing with the DEI woke industrial complex. It doesn't work. As I said, there are all of these internal contradictions, that the oppressor versus oppressed categories are subjective, that, in addition to the sexual atrocities one, another contradiction with women is that we claim to support and amplify and protect the voices of women, but then there's no such thing as a woman. Another contradiction is, we hear all the time in these woke institutions that America is systemically racist, but then at the same time, they are the biggest and most vocal proponents of non-white immigrants coming here. So the whole thing is just a sham. It doesn't work. And I think that all of us are seeing that. And hopefully the good momentum with that will continue. Number 4, back to, I guess, the more pessimistic predictions. I think that there is going to be a big disruptive event that happens in the United States this year. And could be a big terrorist attack. Certainly that seems likely. But I have a feeling that it may be something kind of different that is similarly debilitating and shocking, but not in a predictable way. For instance, it could be something like a cyber attack. That would be an unfortunately very clever way to shock and fracture United States society. And, I have some speculations, China, who I think might be behind such a big event. And we see that with that power that I just subtly acknowledged, they hacked into emails of various United States government officials in 2023. We know that they established a spy base on Cuba to spy on our military bases in Florida. We know that they are behind the fentanyl epidemic, which kills tens of thousands of Americans every year. They sent over that spy balloon about a year ago at this time to take photos of our other military bases, but further up north in our country. They've bought off the president of the United States and his family members with bribes, so they're kind of well positioned to further take advantage of American society. And if it's not a cyber attack, I mentioned a terrorist attack. We in the United States have gotten pretty used to school shootings and mass shootings. I fear that the terrorist attacks are going to kind of become the new mass shootings. Because mass shootings really were not common at all 40 years ago. The biggest one that happened in the 20th century was in 1966 at the University of Texas at Austin. They really only became more common over the past 20 years. And so I think that terrorist attacks are going to kind of come into that space, especially, again, in the wake of all this October 7th stuff, which changed everything. And then finally, number 5 is that I think that the war in Ukraine this year is going to, even more than it already is, turn more towards Russia's favor and against Ukraine. Why? Well, we see right now that the Ukrainian army is already struggling. There was a piece in the Wall Street Journal, I believe it was an op-ed as opposed to a news piece, and this individual wrote about the fact that the Ukrainian army is actually running out of ammunition. And this was cited by this Wall Street Journal editorial, but it was referencing a Washington Post article. So the Ukrainian army appears to be struggling. Also, here in the United States, support for Ukraine has gone down by a large margin since the attack first occurred nearly 2 years ago in February of 2022. We know that at the end of 2023, Congress delayed resolving the United States potential aid package to Ukraine. And so we have all these kind of forces, mainly public opinion, which are turning against Ukraine and for Russia. And sadly, there's a contingent within the Republican Party, which bizarrely seems to be kind of pro-Putin, pro-Russia, which is disappointing to put it lightly. But also right now, it's a war of attrition. It's a protracted war. And oftentimes in a war of attrition, we saw this in the American Civil War, we saw it in World War II on the Eastern Front, the side with the bigger population and the bigger economy and the bigger army tends to bog down and beat down the other side with the smaller of all of those things. And given that Russia has a far larger population, far larger economy, and far larger army. Yeah, it would appear likely that Russia will probably prevail. Sorry I couldn't give you any better news, but as I said, we have to stay on this and be prepared. I'll end with two kind of bonus ones that I think are perhaps more fun and less depressing. I've kind of been arguing that we're going to enter into World War III or are perhaps in the beginning stages already of World War III. Here are two fun ones. I think that the Olympics are going to be a dud. I don't even know if most of you know this. I didn't know this, but the Olympics are going to be held in Paris this year. Like, how many of us are even paying attention to that? I kind of think that the Olympics are going to take the same trajectory as the Oscars and the Emmys, where people just don't really watch them anymore, largely because they've turned a little bit weird. For instance, this year, and maybe some people find this fun, maybe I'm wrong on this, but they're taking out baseball and softball and karate, and they're replacing it with breakdancing. I don't know, could get a really large viewership with breakdancing, but I just don't think people are as excited about the Olympics anymore. Also because they've just changed a lot over the past 3 decades. They used to not allow professional athletes, like people in the NBA, from competing in the Olympics. And that was really cool because you could watch new athletes from your country. But now they've kind of allowed that. And it's like, okay, we see LeBron, every week playing for the Lakers. We don't necessarily need to see LeBron at the Olympics. So that's another bonus prediction. And then a final one, which is totally rogue. So I think that John Fetterman may emerge as one of the stars of the Democratic Party. This is the one prediction that I don't have a lot of evidence for. It's just a feeling. And we saw it recently where John Fetterman actually, surprisingly, made a based statement where he said, actually, I think Republicans are right on immigration. We have to secure the border. So maybe the Democratic Party will look towards someone like John Fetterman in this election year as a person who they can go, you guys all think this guy is a clown, but he actually is the voice of reason in our party. You let me know what you think. I'd be very curious to hear if you think I'm off, if you think I'm right on. And again, we'll see 365 days from now if my predictions prove to be prescient or if I should have listened to Dennis Prager and just stayed out of it. Please comment down below or email me at julie@julie-hartman.com. Great as always to be with you, and I'll see you soon.